Alright, making a video, gotta fix my hair, gotta have some tea, gotta get all ready. I'm gonna watch a video by Amelia and Aaron. I got some time to kill, so I'm gonna hang out, watch their video, and respond real time. Haven't seen it before. This is an off-the-cuff, genuine, sincere response video. It's very exciting. Okay, this is something I totally agree with you guys on, the idea of cameras. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me when anarchists or libertarians or whoever are terrified of the idea of cameras in every corner recording our every movement in public and making sure we're obeying the laws of our local society or culture, or at least, falling into the social norms. Because, like, the only reason that's bad is because right now there's this crazy authoritarian structure that can persecute outsiders for victimless crimes. But if that wasn't the case, if there wasn't crimes against, if smoking pot wasn't a crime, or if, I don't know, like loitering wasn't a crime, or whatever else you could think of, it wouldn't matter. It would just create more accountability. Where if something happened where someone was victimized, if someone's rights were compromised, like, property destroyed or whatever else, having those cameras, all it is a system that allows you to know what happened. So yeah, that's just yes. And I totally agree. Like, as far as the chip goes, like chips in your arms, like, I have nothing against emergent societies forming out of, like, just emergent property rights, where people say, yeah, if you want to join our collective, so to speak, you have to have a chip inserted into your arm and have X number of dollars of insurance in order to ensure that you're not a threatening addition to our society. I see nothing wrong with that. Simply because it's not a, betrayal of human rights. Okay, Amelia, with regards to the idea of jealousy and the idea of if you're uh, not okay with your spouse being with a guy, for instance, but you're okay with them being with a girl, how that could be perhaps an inborn natural disposition and not necessarily an expression of jealousy or insecurity. Yeah, I totally accept that that's a valid possibility. Obviously, I don't know. I'll admit it's less satisfying to me because I want everything to have a clean-cut psychological solution. But I know we're not all born blank slates. We're not all born the same. And my thinking tends to go towards the belief that we are born the same, and I know that's not the truth. That's not the case. It's less psychologically satisfying for me, but yeah, sure. Damn it, reality. And I think the most obvious example of that is how sexuality is so diverse. How obviously there are gay people, and I do believe that. I guess I don't really know if it's a biologically determined thing or if it's a in part cultural thing or early childhood imprinting or whatever else. But regardless, there's obviously natural diversity of sexuality that doesn't come back to insecurity. So I do agree with you guys. Aaron, I really like the idea of black disadvantage versus white privilege for much of the same reasons you're saying. I mean, obviously, yeah, like any example of white privilege that you can talk about, it applies to other races, other groups, sometimes more so. And so it's just really blurs and muddies the waters when you talk about something like white privilege. Even though obviously in certain cultures it exists in varying degrees in certain ways, blah blah blah. And Amelia, to be clear, I do agree that white privilege exists in certain contexts. Um, I just don't agree with how it's generally conceptualized and talked about, and so I tend to think it's bullshit. But that's mostly because of how it's talked about, not because I dismiss all conceptions of white privilege. And to add on that, I definitely do agree, and I'm not sure if I said this in the previous video to you, but I do tend to think that sexuality is one of those things that's much more hardwired relative to anything else. Like, I do tend to think that much of our adopted behaviors and strategies are just, well, they're adopted. They're based on what we think will serve us best in the long term. Whereas sexuality seems to be much more innate and much more just kind of a base drive rather than something that we can change based on what we view as consistent with it, based on what we view as consistent with our overall values. Yeah. Closing thoughts. I mean, it's not that I necessarily agree or disagree with what you're saying about jealousy and polyamory. I do think it's a great point, and I do agree that I tend to come from the perspective of sexuality, or sorry, I tend to come from the perspective that we are blank slates as like a subconscious psychological default, even though I know in my conscious mind that that's bullshit, and that there's huge variety within human beings, not just men but women, although studies seem to imply there's more so in men. And yeah, you skewered those fuckers good. Except for me, I very much appreciate how you were very respectful to me, and yeah, you guys are awesome. Peace.